guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm doing a book wrap up, what I've been reading over the last few months this year. Just thought I'd check in. I have been doing little updates on TikTok of what I've been reading. Sporadically I do sort of monthly wrap up, so if you want to see as I'm going what I'm reading and my reviews, then everything is posted there. I also do Goodreads reviews for everything. And obviously that's how I track everything, but I wanted to do just a wrap up. This is not everything that I've read in the last 3 months, but I just wanted to pick out some of my highlights or ones that I wanted to mention, and yeah, let's crack on. So we're going to start off, as you may know if you've watched any of my recent videos, book related, I very much love anything nostalgic, so all the old Disney Channel books, I'm all about that. And I've recently started to read the little mini fiction Hannah Montana books. As I'm recording this, next week will be the sort of 20th anniversary documentary release of the 20 years of Hannah Montana, so very much this is very topical. And these are little mini fiction, so these are brand new stories all about Hannah Montana, Miley Stewart. And the first one was Rock the Waves, which I gave 5 stars, and then I've just finished In the Loop. And these are very much like Hannah has a big event to partake in, but there's some problems that happen along the way. So the first one is a big surfing competition comes to Malibu, and it's summer, and Miley and Lily are really excited for everything that's going to happen, and Miley's going to be performing as Hannah in the big end of sort of summer concert. However, her dad tells her she needs to complete summer school to finish off getting her grades, and that sort of puts a dampener on things. She meets a cute boy there. That's sort of how the story goes. I gave this 5 stars. It was really nice to read a brand new story for Hannah Montana. Get to see all the characters again. You know, you did have Jackson Oliver in it as well, and it literally felt like they'd taken a transcript from a TV episode and put it in a book. It was so well written. The character elements, their personalities, the humour, all shone through. It was brilliant. And like, you've got the bit where like Robbie Ray will come in and he'll give Miley the heart to heart and give her some advice, and it was just so much like the TV show. And then the second one I finished last night was set in Texas, and again Miley has to go and perform and be a judge for this pageant contest. She stumbles across someone that she used to go to school with who's now not quite who she seems, and there's another celebrity again who is not quite what he seems, which seems to be a running theme in these two. I've got one more left to read, so it'll be interesting to see if the third book matches that and if there's like another celebrity. But along the way, Robbie Ray goes into a barbecue contest. Jackson falls for a girl who's like a cowgirl and she's got no time for him. And yeah, Lily falls in love with the boy. I quite enjoyed these. Yeah, the first one was probably the best. Probably purely just for the location. It was more set, you know, in Malibu at their home. So that's probably why I inched it slightly. Then we have Sabrina the Teenage Witch, 8 Spells a Week, and I wanted to highlight this one, not because it was potentially, I mean it was quite a good book, I think I gave it 4 stars, but this is different because it's kind of like it is a super edition, so it's slightly longer, probably about double the length, and it follows across the course of 7-8 days, and each day Sabrina is shown bad luck and she has to try and overcome that, and try not to use her spells to put things right. So for instance, one day she wants to try and raise some extra money. She finds herself in a toy workshop and she thinks, well, to make this better, like speed up our productivity, I could put a spell on the workers, but then she kind of thinks ahead as to what the problems that could be, and then she doesn't obviously end up using her magic and finds other ways to sort the problem. So it was nice to have more of a meatier book. It'd be slightly longer, and yeah, to read each day and how different each day was. So that was that book. And then the last, I think, of the sort of nostalgic old children's teenage-esque books was Class Trip Chaos, which is a Saved by the Bell book. This one, the kids all go to New York and they want to try and sort of like get off the typical you know, plans that their teachers have set for them, and they stumble across a party in a museum, and they bump into this very like posh wealthy lady, and then the next day their faces are all in the papers because they are being not charged but potentially accused of stealing like one of her earrings, which just so happened to fall into Lisa's bag. So there's that. There's a little bit of romance between the teachers that they're trying to like try and get them together. You've got the off again on again with Jessie and Slater. Zach and Kelly have other different relationships in this, and yeah, so it was different because it was set in New York. It was kind of fun, different in that sense. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I then read Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. This is the the Works sprayed edition, and this has been on my to be read list for quite some time, because I did think it would be quite cute and whimsy and magical, a little bit like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I like Lucy as a content creator. And this was, firstly, I didn't really realise it was going to be set in England. I did think it was going to be set in America. So once I'd overcome that, then yeah, I got right into it. There was a lot of world building. You know, it was a lot of new terminology and bits to get your head around, and it basically follows a witch called Belladonna who has never particularly leaned into her magical side. She's known about it, she's dabbled in little bits, but she's never really used her full potential. And then when her 30th birthday comes along, that's kind of like the test. The witches' coven kind of get together and they're like, right, we're going to now decide whether you keep your powers for the rest of your life or not. And at that point she really risks losing her magic. I found this really interesting. Yeah, the suspense and the world building was really great, and I have got Uncharmed to read next, which is set in the same world but completely different characters in different locations, so that will be interesting to read. For me, this really felt like The Mortal Instruments, but if it was witchy and set in London. That was my view on that. Next, kind of like a meh, but I thought I'd mention it anyway, One by One by Frida McFadden. I have quite enjoyed her books in the past. This was just an okay one for me. It's about a group of friends that go off grid for a week. They go to a cabin, and while they're trying to get there, their car breaks down. They then like run out of water and food, and they seem to be going around in circles in the forest. They can't find this cabin, and they're all starting to suspect each other, and people one by one sort of not get killed off, but they die through various different ways or just go missing. And yeah, it was okay. It was slightly predictable, and when the big sort of reveal happened, it wasn't something that I'd necessarily read before. So I just thought I'd slip that one in. Okay, next we have A Body in Boston, which was a murder she wrote. I really enjoyed reading this. I gave it 5 stars. I love the book. It's a floppy one. But this is set in Boston. Usually I do prefer the one set in Cabot Cove itself, but Boston is not too far. So I still felt like it had almost that small town feel, even though Boston's obviously a city. But the characters were really, I really enjoyed the new characters that they brought in, the taxi driver, people that worked in the pub, and yeah, it's all about Jessica goes and she tries to meet up with an old friend, Harry, and while they're there, Cookie the bartender, his daughter's fiance, is found dead in her apartment, and his daughter is sort of being accused of potentially of the murder, and so they're trying to work this out, and it has a pharmaceutical element to it, and you know, could that be sort of a motivation for killing people and business and money and that sort of thing. So that side of it I felt like I have read before in Murder, She Wrote, the pharmaceutical aspect, but I did still enjoy it, and it's set in Boston, and I enjoyed sort of searching about the hotel and it being a real hotel, and getting to know the location. Then I have 3 biographies. Firstly, I have Hostage by Eli Sharabi. He was one of the hostages that was taken on the 7th of October in 2023, and this was his story of his time being held captive. And he's one of those that have, there's like a handful of hostages that have come out and sort of used their voices to tell their stories and become more public, to advocate for those that have been lost, to remember them, but also to make people aware of what happened. And I think his book is, you know, one of those that's going to stand as a testimony in time. And yeah, it was interesting because I think no matter how many people bring out books about their time in captivity, each one's going to be so individual. Like books on the Holocaust, I've read a lot of fiction and non-fiction books of the Holocaust, and no two books are ever the same, even if two people went to the same camp. Same with this, you know, two hostages are not going to have the same experience. And he even sort of mentions that throughout the book. You know, he's going to have a completely different viewpoint to someone else that he's kept hostage with. And so it talks about how he managed to survive, what the conditions were like, his thoughts on his family back home, which he didn't know at that point had been killed. And I would really recommend this. Obviously I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I think he is such an inspiration to have so much courage and still live his life. When he lost everything, he lost his wife, his daughters, his brother, and to still have the power to move on and start again, I just think is incredible. And you know, we shouldn't have to be reading books like this. It should never have happened, but it did. And you know, naturally, curiosity, we want to know what it's like, we want to hear the horrors, yeah, and we want to honour them and their family members by reading their story and knowing what they were like. Because obviously he talks about like people he met along the way who may not have survived. So yeah, that was that book. And then I have 2 biographies by child actors. So we have Semi Well Adjusted Despite Literally Everything by Alison Stoner, and we have Jamie Lynn Spears' Things I Should Have Said. 2 very different actresses, 2 very different books. So I'll start with Alison Stoner. This has been on my TBR for the longest time because I grew up watching Alison Stoner, you know, from the start when she was in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, through Cheaper by the Dozen, into Camp Rock. I was big fans of all of those shows and films, so I really felt like I had grown up. And not that I thought like that I knew her, but I knew her as much as was shown to us of her storyline and who she was. And this was just so well written. It really had that adult perspective, but looking back at what it was like as a child and how she sort of pushed and pushed and pushed her acting career. She was very self-motivated. She knew that she was kind of the breadwinner of her family. She knew also that being in the acting world, it was tearing her family apart. You know, they were living across the country. She didn't see her dad. She didn't see her siblings. Her stepdad was not the nicest, and her mum then sort of went into problems with alcohol. And you know, some of the things she said along the way, you just think, is that really necessary to talk to your child about? And then of course she talks about not only being in the acting spotlight and her journey through that, which was really interesting to know more about, but also how she kind of basically walked herself into rehab for her anorexia and her eating disorder. And so that was also quite moving to read about, really. And then obviously she talks about after that and stepping away from the limelight and then realising, hang on, I've not been advised correctly on my finances. Where's all my money gone? People have been taking it from her. Spoiler. And you know, it also, there's a lot of trigger warnings in here. There's sexual assault, and obviously eating disorders, and a lot of mental health problems, which a lot of people in the industry, being a child, grew up with. So yeah, it was really compelling to read. I thought it was really well written. It was easy to fly through and read, and it gives you another perspective, like looking back to know how she was feeling at those times, and you sort of watch those scenes back on TV and film and you think, gosh, that was what she was going through, and it's totally different, you know, seeing it now as we've all grown up. And then, so the last one I read was Jamie Lynn Spears' book, and I picked this up on Vinted, and I'm glad I did, because I'm not sure I would have necessarily been as excited by it had I paid full price. It's a lot thinner of the book than Alison Stoner's. Also, hers has no pictures, which I think is really interesting, because there was a lot of like Googling at the time, like when she had her nose job, I was like, oh, now I want to go and see what the difference was. And yeah, pictures of the time, like being in the music video, so you had to go and like research a lot. And I imagine that was probably you know, that was a purposeful thing, not including photos, and I think that was good because it didn't like detract away from her words. Whereas, not to say that it detracts, but you know, there are pictures that Jamie Lynn has put in, and I wouldn't say the pictures are all that relevant to all of the storylines. Yes, some of the ones later on of like her meeting her husband and her family life, but like there was a few pictures where I was like, well, we've not really read that much about that time. There were other things that she mentioned that you would have liked photos from. There was nothing about like from her being on set Zoe 101, or I'm not sure there was anything from her now in Steel Magnolias either. No, it's very much sort of family orientated photos. And so she talks about kind of everything that we want to know, and that's been speculated. So everything from being a child, growing up with a famous sibling, obviously she's Britney Spears' sister, and what that was kind of like for her, and then going into being an actress herself, Zoe 101, and you know, the rumours that spiraled at that time, and then becoming a teenage mum and going through trying to build a family, and then towards the end about her daughter's accident. And I remember reading about that in the press at the time, so it was, not that I enjoyed, that's a weird thing to say, but yeah, I did enjoy sort of finding out more about that, because that was something that she's never really talked about very publicly, is what actually happened at that accident. To start with, the writing was a bit, I don't want to say childish, but it wasn't, coming off straight off the back of Alice and Stoners, it felt a bit more simplified. Yeah, there was some bits where I wanted there to be more about, and there was a lot of this book has had a lot of bad press about it, and I was looking at the Goodreads reviews, and a lot of people put it down quite largely on her and the rest of her family for, you know, what happened to Britney and her conservatorship. And you've got to think, Jamie Lynn's only 14 to sort of 17 at that time. You know, she didn't have a lot of power. She was very still much influenced by her family. She was a new mum herself at the time, and so I don't think it's right to fully put the blame on her. Obviously, and she admits it herself, there are times where she wished she could have spoken up more and advocated more for her, but she also recognises she had to put herself and her daughter first, and she was kind of going by what her parents fed to her, which I think is understandable. As a young impressionable woman who kind of idolises their parents, you're gonna listen and be influenced with what they say. So that, I think the people that maybe give her a bad review maybe haven't read the full book. And then, like I said, it goes on about her having her firstborn, and then meeting her then husband, and then Maddie's accident. And again, that was, I don't want to keep saying interesting, but it was interesting to read about, because, like I said, she's not really spoken much about it, and she did go quite in depth about how the circumstances came to be and sort of afterwards. And it's amazing to read that and then see Maddie now, and she is, from what I know, sort of fully recovered. I think that is a testimony to a higher power, or coincidence, fate, whatever you want to call it. But Jamie Lynn did point out that there were so many factors that, had they not been there at the right place at the right time, it would have been a very different outcome for her, like the temperature of the water that she went into, and the paramedics being just around the corner, those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, I would recommend, if you grew up with Zoe 101, and I would recommend, if you can pick this up, just the writing's not quite there as it was with Alison Stoner's book, I would say. So yeah, that is my sort of fire through book reviews. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's been a little bit longer, but hopefully there's something in there that maybe piques your interest. And I've got a big TBR next to me of books to read, so I want to hop in and read those. I also really want to do a bit of a book declutter. Nothing huge, but I just need a little bit of breathing room on my shelves. Obviously you see all of this. I've got 2 other bookcases in here, and yeah, I need to give myself some room. So I think this background might change a little bit slightly, because I think there's some there that I could probably get rid of. I will try and film that, so you'll see that soon. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys.